Air dry clay Christmas, here are some new DIY ideas to try today. I love working with air dry clay, and here on Red Rocking Bird I have plenty of project ideas to share with you. Air dry clay is great for beginners. Let's make some easy Christmas ornaments. I use a smooth non-porous tile to roll out my clay, and any cylindrical object to use as a rolling pin. Air dry clay is so satisfying to use, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I do. The clay is now about 1/4 of an inch in thickness. This first air dry clay ornament is really simple but really effective. Using some cookie cutters that I dedicate to my craft, I press down firmly and cut out some shapes. If you are a beginner, then I say start with something really simple like this. All this excess clay that we're not using right now, I always take this up and give it a really good knead, so that next time I'm ready to come to use this, it's a lovely smooth and neat ball. If you don't do this and you leave it on the side, it would start to dry, as air dry clay is exactly that, it dries naturally in the air. Nice and smooth, I then wrap that clay back up, ready to use later. Straws are really handy when it comes to air dry clay, and I always have plenty of these in my stash, always ready to reuse for another project. Marking out the centre with my ruler and then cutting out the hole in the middle with the straw. This time using a smaller cookie cutter to indent and mark the clay. With the clay I love to play, experiment and use the things I have around my home. Taking a tiny rectangle of card, I use a pencil to get a nice curve on it, and I use some tape to bring the two sides to a point. Why, you ask? Well, it makes my perfect little leaf indent tool. Simple, easy, and really effective. And hopefully you'll agree with me how beautiful these air dry clay ornaments turn out in the end. So here I'm creating some mini wreaths. Even if you don't recreate this exact project, hopefully you can be inspired and see what you can make out of some different items that you can find around your home. Using the other end of the paintbrush, I make some indents in the clay as some berries. So with some simple techniques and very little skill, you can create something beautiful too. But as I always say, just really enjoy the process. Air dry clay is really therapeutic, and I hope you love it too. So have a go at making some, decorate your tree with all of these, and they would really make lovely Christmas gifts as well. Leave these to dry flat on my tile, and as they dry you can see them really whitening up around the edges. While I wait for those to dry, I take the piece of clay that we rolled up and put back in the pack just a little bit earlier, and with this I'm going to make some clay beads. Some clay beads that we can use as Christmas ornaments, so another really easy clay project. Take a small section of the clay, roll your hands together and make a nice tidy ball of clay. Don't worry if it doesn't come to a perfect circle to begin with. You can smooth it out, and any cracks that appear just smooth out lightly. If you need be, just add the tiniest a bit of water to smooth out any cracks. Even when the cubes of clay have been sitting here just for a few minutes, they can start to go slightly crispy on the outside, so I always give them a nice knead and bring them back to that really lovely smooth clay. The clay is much easier to work with in that way. Now we want to make these into our beads, and so I take something like a pencil and make the first indent, and then I go through with something like the end of a paintbrush. And then I always like to add something like the end of the pencil into both ends, and then you get that really lovely bead finish. I've always made beads in this way out of clay, and that works for me, but I have seen lots of people use a straw and cut out the centre as well, so it is up to you. I find this way is really neat. If any cracks do form, just make sure you smooth them out, and you can reshape them at this stage too. Set aside and dry. Nice slow drying in a cool area works best. Each year for a new ornament, I love to cut out a new shape which I don't have a cookie cutter for, and so to do this and do any design, I love to take a piece of cardboard, draw my design out, and make sure when you're designing anything with air dry clay, you have some nice smooth edges and nothing too fragile sticking out. So the arms I'm placing behind the body, the ears and the legs are a really good robust shape, and nothing's too fragile or vulnerable once it's turned into the air dry clay. You can cut the shape out with scissors just as it is, but I like to fold mine in half and follow one half so I get a really nice symmetrical design. Templates are really useful because you can use them over and over again to make plenty of your little design. You can make the templates from paper, but I try to make mine from card if I can, because once you've rolled out the clay, you can place the template over the top of the air dry clay, roll this again. Once you lift up your design, you're left with that nice indent that we can then use to cut out. I use a scalpel and very slowly and carefully cut out the design. If you are enjoying my videos, please do subscribe as it really helps my channel out, and please hit the thumbs up button. Also, if you comment below, I do try to reply to as many of you as I can and answer any of those really important questions. Using the edge of the knife and my finger, I can smooth out the edges of the bear. You can also use a small amount of water to smooth out the imperfections, and you can use a paintbrush like this. But don't worry too much, as we can sand the clay once it's fully dry. I'm going to add a slightly different hanging to this, and in one of my other air dry clay Christmas videos I made a different kind of bear and used this kind of wire hanging, and so I've added 2 holes with the straw. Or you could add just 1 hole at the top. While I have the clay out and handy, I always love to cut out some other shapes and just use up some of that other clay and let these dry alongside those pieces I've just made. Little clay items like this little heart make really good gift tags at Christmas too. So hopefully these are all easy and straightforward for you to give a go. See what cookie cutter shapes you can get, whether Christmassy or not Christmassy, and it's really nice just before Christmas to be able to roll out lots of clay, cut out lots of different shapes and let them dry, and then I like to bag these up and give them as gifts at Christmas. Give a gift of some acrylic paints and some paintbrushes, and there you have a really good craft that you can do over Christmas with the family or let the kids just enjoy. But these crafts really are for everyone. After a few hours, these mini wreaths have started to dry, and I can gently lift them off my tile, revealing the wet clay underneath. You can see the colour change, that they've gone white on the tops, and now that they're still damp underneath, it gives us that added bonus of being able to add those indents in to the back as well. It's lovely when you start to see the clay dry beautifully. It turns that really crisp white. Once fully dry, they can be sanded with some fine sandpaper. This is 800 grit sandpaper. The higher the number, the finer the grit, so anything above the 800. Before sanding and painting, I tend to let my clay dry for about 4 days in total, just to make sure the clay is 100% dry, but that's here in the UK where it can be a little bit colder. At this stage you could seal and varnish the air dry clay, and I'll show you the varnishing of them later, if you like the look of them in white, but I'd like to add a little bit of paint. For this one I've reached for my watercolour paints, as I want just a different kind of look. I quite often use acrylic paints, but here I've mixed up some lovely green wash and I'm dabbing that into the design and trying to let that flow into all those cracks. Or rather indents, should I say, because we have no cracks here. They've dried lovely and slowly. With a slightly lighter green, I'm dabbing on the watercolour just randomly all around the piece. So as I do, have a play and experiment and see what happens. I think they need a little bit of extra detail, so I'm just flicking on some of that paint just to give some more texture. Not adding too much watercolour paint, as we don't want to add too much water back to the clay. I let these dry fully, and then for the berries I'm going in with some acrylic paint. I fancied doing these green and red, but they'd look lovely in blues as well, and any colour combination you wish. All the paint is fully dry now, and to add some rustic texture I'm taking that sandpaper again and very lightly sanding parts of the piece and parts of the green away, so we left with that nice rustic feel, that maybe aged feel of ceramics. Make sure you're doing this in a well ventilated area or wearing a mask, as you don't want to breathe in any of the dust particles. Taking some craft varnish, I completely seal and varnish all of the clay. This is a glossy one, so it's going to give it a really glossy old ceramic feel. Leave them to dry fully. The clay beads I'm painting with acrylic paint. To paint these, it's really good technique to be able to put them on top of a pencil or something like this, paint them and then put them in a jar, and that way they dry really well. A fine paintbrush and a steady hand is good for lots of details, but don't worry if you don't like adding details in this way. You can add absolutely any details or just leave them as their plain colours. A technique I love quite a lot is dipping the end of my paintbrush into the paint and then adding some dots. That's quick, easy and simple, and very effective too. So take your time, paint, relax, listen to some music or a podcast, or watch your favourite programme on TV while you're doing your clay. And watch more of my videos, of course. Leave them to dry, ready to string together shortly. So going back to these, you can package them up and give them as gifts, and they really are beautiful to paint. Alternatively, you make lots of shapes and then paint them and adorn them on your tree. What else would you like to see me make out of air dry clay? Please do let me know below. Also below there is a super thanks button if you'd like to contribute to the channel in any way at all. I am always grateful if you can support me in any way. There's also a coffee link below. I typically paint on simple designs like these, and I find it really relaxing and therapeutic to sit and paint. And also with a project like this, it's good at practicing those painting skills. My Christmas bear is going to be white, but first of all I paint a white coat of paint all over the whole design, and that way when I add the varnish on later it remains white. If you add varnish to bare air dry clay, it can sometimes just go a little bit darker. So if you want to make sure your designs are a crisp white, always paint with white acrylic paint first. Then have fun with the details. I know lots of friends and relatives that would love one of these as a Christmas gift, and so hopefully I'll make plenty more before Christmas. What do you make as Christmas gifts? Do you love to receive a Christmas gift that's handmade? I sure do. Please do let me know in the comments below any thoughts and suggestions. If you are new to air dry clay, hopefully you agree with me that lots of easy and simple projects can be created with just a little bit of skill. Don't worry if you're not fantastic at painting, then just try your best, go with what works for you, and most of all, just enjoy yourself and have fun. Just make sure you seal and varnish all of the pieces at the end once everything's fully dry, all the paint is completely dry, as that will prolong the life of your pieces and protect them so that no moisture can get in there and harm the pieces. For the bear I took some wire. You can either use some thin wire in several strands all together or some thicker wire. Pushing it through the hole, wrapping it round, and then adding a nice big loop around the top of the bear. Ready to hang. I loop through all the beads next, and they're beautiful to decorate with and so easy and simple. And hopefully you've enjoyed all of these projects and you're going to give some of them a go. Thank you for watching, and I'll look forward to seeing you in the next creative video.